Perfection. The condition, state, or quality of being free or as free as possible from all flaws or defects. It's not every day this word is thrown around, especially when talking about video games. In order for a video game to be considered perfect, it would need to have fun gameplay, deep lore, tough challenges, a pleasing aesthetic, and much more. Now, I don't personally think that anything in this world is physically capable of being perfect, but when it comes to video game franchises, The Legend of Zelda is almost exactly that. During the 30+ years, this franchise and its many installments remain almost perfect. Incredibly positive reviews on nearly every single game. The Legend of Zelda may just be the most flawless video game franchise of all time. I can't think of a single thing that this franchise has done wrong.
Doesn't work if you cut top to bottom on it. You don't know.
Okay, maybe they've screwed up on a few things. Despite being universally loved by nearly every single video game enjoyer, the Legend of Zelda series is no stranger to having rough patches on great games. Sometimes those patches are even the reason the title can't be considered as the best game of all time. Even the most hardcore Zelda fans, such as myself, can happily admit that there are many flaws in the series. I've spent all my time on this channel praising the Legend of Zelda and all of its greatness, so I figured it's time to look at the dark side of the Zelda franchise. Flaws like the abominated defect, the untouched fault, and the ever-hated King Zora. Why does he take so long to move? Please go quicker. I need to save Hyrule now. Joking aside, today I'll be covering the worst parts of every single Zelda game. I chose a handful of my least favorite things about every Zelda game. These can range from aspects that are objectively annoying to personal grudges that I hold against the individual game. This list is in no particular ranking order, so I'll be covering every game in order of release date. Now, before I even start talking about the worst moments, I'll go out and say that this list is completely my opinion. I know I just jokingly mentioned the word objective, but there is honestly no such thing as something that is objectively bad, since everyone is entitled to their own opinion. So I apologize in advance if my opinions make any of you mad, like I've been known to do in the past. I'm also expecting a lot of skill issue comments, since a few of these picks are really personal to me specifically. Now, with all of that clarification shit out of the way, let's piss some people off. The first game, or games technically, that I wanted to talk about just to get out of the way is actually every single multiplayer game. Those being both Four Swords and Triforce Heroes, as all three games have the exact same flaw, that being actually playing the game. Due to these games being multiplayer, playing them alone is either very irritating or downright impossible. So if you don't have any friends, you might as well kiss any dreams you have of actually enjoying these games goodbye. They did just add Four Swords Adventures on Switch Online, so I might have to give that a try, but again, you still need friends on the Switch, which I don't have any. The Legend of Zelda 1 for the NES, a classic 80s game that gets you right into the action after a very brief backstory. Alright, Hyrule! Huh, looks like a cave. I better go check it out. A sword? Awesome! Alright, time to adventure. Wait. Where am I supposed to go again? My issue with Zelda 1 has always been the same. How the hell are you supposed to know where to go? I guess walking around aimlessly is a good way to get started, and it might even get you pretty far in the game, but let's be honest, the lack of direction is really annoying. Some of the mandatory progression areas are behind completely hidden breakable walls. Like, how was I supposed to know that I had to use a bomb there? I really had to burn down that tree? I have no clue how kids in the 80s could have beaten this game without using the latest issue of Nintendo Power. Actually, I don't think anybody actually did beat this game without using some sort of guide or word of mouth from a friend. Even I, a 2000s kid, used my Hyrule Historia and the Hyrule map it included to beat the game. But despite the complaints, this game is still legendary and helped set up the top-down 2D view that the series is known for. Boy, I'm glad they didn't change that. But wait, they did. Coming out just a year later, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link took the beloved top-down 2D view of the original game and said, you know what this world needs more of? Side-scrollers. The difference between Zelda 1 and 2 is shocking. Why Nintendo made these changes is beyond me. It's not like people were complaining about the original, but believe it or not, this complaint is only half of the choice for the worst part of this game. This game is notorious for being hard as shit. Zelda 2 is home to some of the most ruthless enemies and bosses this franchise has ever seen. Just take the final boss for example. In order to kill him, you have to actually reach the boss room with enough magic to use a spell, or else you're physically incapable of damaging him. And when you finally kill the final boss, the final final boss shows up, that being Dark Link. But seriously, like, I get that you need to make the games hard to draw out playing time, but this is just ridiculous. Hopefully they took the difficulty down a little bit for the next installment. Much better. Well, kinda. I've only ever played through A Link to the Past twice, one being when I was younger where I only played through half of the game, and the other being literally a few weeks ago, so this game is really fresh on my mind. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but my least favorite thing in both of the playthroughs was the difficulty of this game. I had mentioned how much I disliked this game's controls in the previous video and was met with a lot of skill issue comments, and honestly, yes it is, but it still took away from my experience of the game. As I just mentioned, the controls were something that I also had a huge problem with. The way Link swings his sword feels so awkward in this game. I'll try my best to describe it, but you're given the ability to move in every single possible direction, but your sword only swings in 4 of those areas. Hitting enemies with my sword felt really inconsistent, and I honestly thought there were a few frames of animation where my sword didn't even register a hit. So if you don't hit an enemy directly head on, good luck, because you're losing 3 hearts a hit. But I wanted to talk about another issue that I had with this game besides just the overall difficulty. Why do we act like this game has great dungeons? Was it a huge step up from the NES titles? Yes. Have they aged like milk? Sometimes. This isn't me saying all the dungeons are bad, but there was definitely a handful that I highly disliked. The first 2 dungeons are so plain and boring, there's genuinely no redeeming qualities about them. Skull Woods was just a confusing mess. I actually beat this dungeon by complete accident in like 12 minutes on my recent playthrough, since like 70% of the dungeon is completely optional. Gargoyle's Domain was yet another horribly designed maze dungeon, and the Ice Ruins had the universally hated ice physics. That's not even me mentioning the boss fights for any of those dungeons. This game does have some pretty decent dungeons too, but I think the overall roster is quite weak. I'm glad future 2D installments had much better dungeons. Link's Awakening has always been one of my favorite games in the entire franchise, taking place on the beautiful Koholint Island. Koholint Island is one of my favorite locations in any Zelda game. Be it the beautiful beaches, homey villages, or the Titanic Mountains, this island is just a great place to explore. Meeting many of the lovely island residents throughout your journey is really fun, as every character you meet is really interesting and makes you care for the individual. Doing tasks like retrieving Bow Wow from Madame Meow Meow, finding Richard's golden leaves, and even going on a date with your new girlfriend, Marin. I truly wish you could just stay on this island forever. Unfortunately, that is not possible. Later in the game, it is revealed that Koholint Island doesn't actually exist, and is just a part of the Windfish's dream. After defeating the nightmare inside the Windfish, he is awoken. The end of his slumber ultimately ends up erasing Koholint Island from existence. All the people who you've come to love, the places you've visited, and the impact you've made, gone. Just like that. F*** you, Nintendo. F*** you. As if it wasn't obvious enough, the worst part about Link's Awakening is that it strips you of any happiness you've ever had while playing the game. Also, this fish boss kinda sucks. While I don't think any Zelda game is completely flawless, Ocarina of Time is the closest thing in this franchise to perfection. I genuinely don't think there is anything horrible about this game at all. While it may have aged, the game is still phenomenal even today. But in my many playthroughs of this game, one part has always stuck out as the worst. The worst part of this game is the water dungeon hated by all, the iconic Jabu Jabu's Belly. You thought I was gonna say the water temple, didn't you? Well, joke's on you, I actually like that dungeon a lot, besides the repetitive pausing in the N64 version, but that was fixed in the 3DS version, so play that instead. I won't go into detail about why this dungeon sucks, since I already did on my dungeon ranking video, which I'll add in the card at the top of the screen if you want to check that out. The atmosphere is gross. Who thought this was a good idea? We've got awesome dungeons in volcanoes, pirate ships, even floating in the heavens. Yet before all of those ideas were done, Nintendo decided to go for a dungeon inside of the digestive system of a f***ing fish. Why? Like, why? The escort part is also quite tedious, but also unique, so I don't have that huge of an issue with it. Ever since I was a kid, this had always been my least favorite part of Ocarina of Time, and in my opinion is the only thing holding this game back from being flawless. One of the things Nintendo always tends to get right is remakes of their older games, whether it be a graphic update or improving on the previous flaws and annoyances from the original. Nearly every single Zelda game remake is great, and I'm putting a lot of emphasis on nearly because there is one that sticks out like a sore thumb. Majora's Mask's remake is bad. This choice is honestly a bit of a stretch since you can play the original and not have any issues, but I've only ever fully completed the 3DS version of the game, so I'm gonna be talking about that one here instead. It is beyond me on why Nintendo changed so much from the original game when creating this remake. Every single boss from the original was loved due to the fact that there was no apparent weak point and you could just wail your sword at it to do damage. The 3D remake added a stupid eyeball on every single boss, which makes absolutely no sense. The originals were completely fine. Why did they change that? This change was so dumb. But easily my biggest issue with the remake is the whole entire Great Bay section of the game. Zora swimming now takes magic to move fast. Technically it is possible to move without magic, but it's really lame and not efficient at all. One of the most beloved things about the original were these swimming mechanics, and they just went and changed it for no reason whatsoever. The Great Bay Temple was also changed a lot, holding the player's hand while completing puzzles by showing where to shoot the ice arrows to create platforms instead of leaving it up to the creativity of the player. I put this dungeon very low on my dungeon ranking just based off of the remake, since I've never actually played the N64 Great Bay, which had angered a lot of people, since the original version is apparently quite great. Though they did add some good changes like the graphic update or the double Song of Time, this remake really lets the original game down a lot, as Majora's Mask is one of, if not the best Zelda games ever. Alright, time to get personal. I'm currently playing through Oracle of Seasons and I'm honestly enjoying it a lot, though I found the first few dungeons were not very good at all, but that's not what I wanted to talk about. The worst part about Oracle of Seasons is that stupid boss with the spike ball. That boss fight. This boss fight is so annoying. Using the magnetic glove to push and pull the ball, which does damage to you if you pull it too close by the way, was so annoying since the push and pull changes every time you click the button. This fight also requires you to be really precise with the pushes since the boss splits into smaller versions of itself and you gotta kill them all before the boss can turn back into its big version again. This boss fight blows. Easily one of the worst in the entire series. The next pick could actually be a valid choice for all three Game Boy games, but I decided to say it for the Oracle of Ages since I've never actually played it before. Therefore, I have no valid opinion on it. All of the Game Boy games have a really shitty inventory system. I understand that there were only 2 buttons on this colorful little brick, but playing them on modern hardware is honestly just brutal. The sword being an equipable item and not just an item equipped at all times is so stupid, as well as the Pegasus boots and even the power bracelet. Why should I need to pause the game every single time I want to lift a fucking pot? This part of the game has aged really poorly and I'm glad it was fixed on the Switch remakes. Now we just need to wait for Nintendo to release the Oracle games in HD. Please, I'm begging you. If you watched my last video where I reacted to subscribers submitted unpopular opinions on Zelda, you'll know that I'm not the biggest Wind Waker fan. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love the game and think it's great, I just don't think it competes with other 3D Zelda games. And a large reason why I heavily dislike this game is the Forsaken Fortress. Sorry buddy, it had to happen. After leaving Outset Island with your new pirate gang, the hero's journey begins. Alright, adventure! Yeah! I can't wait to go sail the sea and explore everything this huge world has to offer, with my pirate buddies and my awesome sword that I just got like 5 minutes ago and hardly used. But first, we have to make a pit stop and save my stupid sister from that bird guy. Alright, Errol, here I come! With my awesome sword skills, no enemy stands a chance! Wait, sword, no, come back! Well, that's gone forever now. A dungeon that completely strips you of your sword is incredibly irritating, especially since it's right at the start of the game. I won't do a deep dive into why I hate this dungeon since I did so in my dungeon ranking video, which I recommend checking out after this video if you want to hear me complain about this place. At least this dungeon only takes up a short portion of the game. It would really suck if a boring part of the game took up a majority of the gameplay. Oh wait, it does. The actual worst part of Wind Waker in my opinion is the Triforce fetch quest at the end of the game, which has Link sailing the seas for all 8 shards of the broken Triforce. As I just mentioned, this takes place right before the very end of the game, so unlike most other Zelda games which flow into the final act pretty smoothly, Wind Waker decides to kill the hype completely. This part of the game really drags on. They even fixed it in the HD version, which I think was a great idea on Nintendo's part, but even then still takes a long time and brings the pacing in the game to a screeching halt. Another thing that I wanted to briefly touch up on that I disliked about this game was how much wasted potential this game had. While this complaint is super vague, I've always had this issue with Wind Waker where it didn't feel like there was enough stuff to do in the main story. Mainly the lack of dungeons, in which there were apparently 2 scrap dungeons in the initial planning. Now I'm fully aware that this game was actually rushed on the original release, but it would have been very interesting to see those scrap dungeons in the HD remake. I honestly don't have that many issues with Minish Cap. I had only played through the game once, and that was very recently, so this game is still relatively fresh in my mind. I actually had to resort to the internet for help on this one, and was surprised to see a lot of people didn't like the shrinking mechanic. I do agree it was slightly tedious at times, but I thought it was one of the most unique and fun parts of the entire game. Others were saying the final boss was incredibly unforgiving, which honestly, that's fair. I'm gonna have to dig deep and personal for the worst part of this game, since I think the pros heavily outweigh the cons. Hear me out for a second. Did anybody else think the Palace of Winds was annoying as shit? Now, don't get me wrong, I did love this dungeon, but I thought progressing through this dungeon was honestly just brutal at times. There were hardly any heart drops for about 70% of the dungeon. I actually think I remember there being 3 in like maybe the first half. So good luck if you actually lose any. I died in this dungeon so many times, it's not even funny. Making your way back from the entrance of the dungeon is also not fun at all, as a lot of the areas are completely focused on waiting for whatever thing to move. Well, this is totally a skill issue. It's honestly the only thing that I can think of for the worst part of Minish Cap, since I really do like this game a lot. In a game as amazing as Twilight Princess, picking the worst part is almost impossible. This game has a great story, dungeons, and atmosphere. I love everything about this game. Well, I guess we can count that guy. He was pretty annoying. Joking aside, there is a few things about Twilight Princess that I really didn't like. The first and most popular one is how long the intro is. Another topic I've covered in my hot take video, but I'll sum up my opinions on the intro really quickly. I think story-wise it works really well, but playing through it is an absolute slog. It takes more than an hour to get to the first dungeon in this game. An hour and 24 seconds to be exact. I can see why so many people would be put off of this game just by playing the intro. I had hoped this issue would be kind of a one-time thing that, you know, would get better on a replay, and kinda. Generally knowing where to go does speed up the process as well as skipping dialogue, but the fact that I had straight up forgotten about half of the things in this intro made it feel even longer than it was. Speaking of things I forgot in the intro, the whole wolf part was one of them. I had no idea how I completely forgot this, since it's one of the most important parts of the intro, but I did. Another thing that I disliked about this game was the parts where you're forced into your wolf form to collect those bug things. I especially hated the Lake Hylia one due to how big the range of the Twilight was, but those don't even compare to my real pick for the worst part in Twilight Princess, which is easily, without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest disgrace Nintendo has ever even had the thought of releasing. The Oca. If you're watching this video as a returning viewer, I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that I've never played either DS game, meaning I obviously can't make a valid pick for the worst part of the game. So instead I resorted to picking from the internet. The worst part of Phantom Hourglass is pretty notoriously the Temple of the Ocean King. Now, I don't actually know that much about this dungeon apart from the fact that you're on a timer and have to come back to the same place multiple times, which, trust me, I absolutely hate it when Nintendo does that. Nothing much else I can say about this game since I haven't actually played it. And the same goes for Spirit Tracks. Honestly, I think I'm gonna do a collective worst thing for both DS titles here, that being that there's no way to play them besides original hardware. And, well, the E word, which I won't say because I don't want to get a hit placed on my head by Nintendo. I do feel like these are the perfect games to make Switch remakes for. The graphics and controls are super dated and could totally use the renewal. But since I picked for Phantom Hourglass, I'll make a pick for Spirit Tracks as well. Apparently the flute is really annoying to play, so I'll choose that. And we finally arrive at the most controversial installment in the entire Legend of Zelda franchise. Link, the Faces of Evil. Just kidding, it's Skyward Sword. You'd probably think the pick for this game is easy, being the motion controls, and well, I do have my issues with the motion controls, namely fighting certain enemies like this guy and this guy. I didn't have that many problems with them and actually enjoyed it more than I hated them. I thought the motion controls were a very unique way to control Link and really help with the immersiveness. But I'm getting off topic and being way too positive. Get negative, now! The worst part about Skyward Sword is the avocado of evil, the f***ing imprisoned. This is the worst Zelda boss in the entire franchise. Yeah, I just said that. Everything about this boss is stupid. I mean, look at him. This thing is supposed to be the base of all evil in the universe. This thing? Really? I mean, look at his toes. How are this guy and this guy the same? The actual boss fight is very annoying as well. I hate being on a time crunch when doing literally anything, and this boss's whole gimmick is that you have to kill it before it reaches the temple, or else the entire world implodes. Not really, but that's kind of what they make it seem like. Chopping away at its toes is kind of satisfying, but also super annoying to do. Well, at least you only have to beat this guy one time. If only that was the truth. You have to fight this guy 3 times. Every time the fight becomes more and more annoying, though the third fight is actually probably my favorite. The second fight made me want to launch my Joy-Con right through my screen. I only realized how truly annoying this boss was when I fought him in the Thunder Dragon's lightning round, basically Skyward Sword's boss gauntlet. Avoiding that lightning stomp thing to try and keep as many hearts as you can while trying to pick away at his toes was incredibly irritating. This boss sucks a lot. I also wanted to mention quickly how I have an issue with the overall overworld in this game. It feels really small and underwhelming compared to other Zelda games. Like, does this not feel small for anybody else? Now, this might just be because every area is separate and not together like the other games. I know a lot of people have this complaint as well, and I really think Skyward Sword could benefit from having a bigger world. I do still love this game though, so don't take any of this stuff too harshly. Except for this guy. I still hate him. Remember how I said A Link to the Past's biggest issue was how difficult the game was? Well, the follow-up game, A Link Between Worlds, is the exact opposite of that. This game is easy as shit. A literal 3-year-old infant could beat this game without taking any damage. I'm being serious. I really do like this game and think it doesn't have that many obvious worse things, but the difficulty of this game always threw me off. I've played through this game many times, and even when I was younger, I had absolutely no challenges with this game at all. But I did want to talk about another thing that I hated in this game besides just the difficulty level, since that's kind of vague. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the HLB. In today's game, we have the Hyrule Heroes versus the Lorule Lizalfos. This rivalry has been all the talks all season, with Lorule recently picking up Ganon on a 4-year, 300 million rupee deal. I'm joined today in the announcer's box with Beetle. Beetle, say hello to the fans at home. Alright. Stepping up to plate, we have Link, an 11-year-old rookie from the Hyrule State University. He has been hitting exceptionally well this season so far. Will he be able to deliver this time?
The 1-1 for Tyson. Batista with a drive. Deep left field. No doubt about it. You can only flirt with fire for so long.
Though I haven't had that many issues with it in my more recent playthroughs, the baseball minigame had always given me issues when I was younger. Aiming where your ball was gonna land was incredibly challenging, and I remember getting quite frustrated at this game when I was younger. Overall, one of the more flawless games in the Zelda series and one of my personal favorites. Now we've finally arrived at the turning point of the Zelda franchise. Not necessarily for the worse, just to a more open style game. The worst part of Breath of the Wild should come to no surprise to any recurring viewers, as I've mentioned it in almost every single video. Why are there no dungeons? The removal of dungeons and the addition of shrines and divine beasts was always a puzzling change to me. I get that they wanted to change a lot in this game compared to the earlier titles, but come on. Removing one of the most beloved parts in the franchise for 4 repetitive, boring robots? Bad choice, Nintendo. Bad choice. I actually don't hate the divine beasts all that much, but I really don't like how they were the replacement for dungeons. The shrines also kinda worked with the game and were a lot more unique than the divine beasts were, but the large number just makes me feel like they were added as filler to make the world seem bigger and for there to be, you know, more stuff to do. I will also mention that I don't hate the weapon durability system. I do think it's quite flawed, but I don't mind it whatsoever in this game. I'm really glad they fixed most of the issues I had with Breath of the Wild and the sequel, Tears of the Kingdom. Speaking of Tears of the Kingdom, This game is also no stranger to having many flaws. While they did fix most of the issues with the dungeons, a lot of the dungeons they added were very repetitive, using the same terminal activation objective in every single dungeon. And I think the water temple from this game specifically is really bad. This game also felt way too similar to its predecessor in many ways for me not to notice it. I'm not at all an Tears of the Kingdom was an $80 DLC believer, but I do think that some parts of the game could have used a lot more work. For example, the sky and the depths were both quite repetitive, but neither of those points are my biggest issue with the game. My biggest issue with Tears of the Kingdom was the story. While most of the story is pretty standard Zelda stuff, Ganondorf is back, Hyrule needs saving, Link to the rescue, and all that good stuff. My biggest complaint with the story were the memories. Memories were essentially the way of unlocking parts of the lore and finding out what the hell actually happened to Zelda. Seems pretty cool, right? Well, here's the catch. You can unlock the memories in any order you want, which means unless you're following a guide, which I was not, this story can literally be spoiled for you by you. It would have been so simple if they made an order to it, and it would have helped the execution of the story a lot. My other issue with this game's story was the whole dragonification plotline. I really hope I didn't butcher that word, by the way. This game had made it pretty clear that this process was completely irreversible, and activating it was like the ultimate sacrifice. Well, Zelda ends up activating her dragonification by eating her stone and turning into the dragon we've been seeing all throughout the game. You know, the one with the Master Sword lodged into its head. After defeating Ganondorf in this super epic dragon on dragon battles, Rauru and Sonia use their powers to turn Zelda back into a human. Wait, what? I thought this process was completely irreversible. I understand Nintendo wanted a happy ending, but come on, this feels like a huge ass pull. Keeping Zelda in her dragon form forever would have been a really bittersweet way to end the game. And Zelda's courage to initiate the dragonification kind of feels way less impactful since she is able to transform right back afterwards. But to be fair, we did get this super awesome moment of Link reaching out for Zelda, so I guess it's not all that bad. Oh, okay. That was a lot to unpack. With such a perfect video game franchise, picking the worst parts in every Zelda game was a demanding task. While some were very easy to pick, others were the exact opposite. As big of a fan as I am of the series, I can openly admit it has its flaws. But that doesn't stop me from loving the games. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to subscribe and turn on post notifications. I really appreciate it. And feel free to leave a comment saying your least favorite part of any Zelda game. I love to hear from you guys, and I try my best to respond to every single comment, or, you know, interact with it in some way. Because honestly, I really like chatting with you guys. Thanks again for all the support you guys have been giving me on my channel this early on. None of this would have been possible without you guys, so again, I thank you. I hope all of you guys have an amazing day or night, and I'll see you all in the next one.